Hey there, Oracle community. How's it going? This is Jake, community developer here at Oracle, and thanks a million for joining me for another how-to video. In this video, we're going to be talking about how we can configure Komiser to access multiple AWS accounts from a Kubernetes cluster. So first of all, I'd like to thank a community member, Johnny McCullough, who pointed out the need for more documentation around how to deploy Komiser to an EKS cluster and to access this cross-account configuration. Because if we're talking about the Komiser CLI, it's pretty straightforward. In the README, you'll see that you just simply need to go to your credentials file in your .aws folder in your local configuration, and you simply just add the profiles there for your different AWS accounts. As we're going to see here, there's a few extra steps when it comes to configuring this for your pod in an EKS cluster to access this multiple accounts. Without further ado, let's jump right in. First of all, I'd just like to point out what we're going to need. So I would definitely recommend using the Helm chart that we have here, where we have a lot of Kubernetes manifests ready for us. And once we have that, we're also going to need, obviously, a couple of AWS accounts, at least. And one thing that I would really recommend looking at while we go along is this official AWS walkthrough, in which they talk about enabling cross-account access to EKS cluster resources. This is mainly what we're going to follow, but I'm going to also talk about the steps that I took and things that I would keep in mind when trying to do it for Komiser. Okay, so I think it's easier to go over to a notepad over here and have a quick look at what we're going to be looking at, right? So we have, of course, two accounts in this case. We can add more later, but the principle works for just an extra account, which is the following. So let's say we have an admin account and the dev account. I just have these numbers because later on we're going to be looking at roles, and I just want to be able for it to be clear which account we're talking about. So we have admin and dev, and we have the Kubernetes cluster, which is in our admin account, and we're going to want to access AWS resources in the actual admin account, but we're also going to want to add access resources in the dev account. Okay, so that's what we're trying to solve here, this workflow. Cool. So what are we going to need? So we're going to need the following things. So in the admin account, we're going to need an OIDC provider registered in IAM. So that just means over here in IAM, we have an identity provider section in which we're going to grab the OIDC provider that's linked to the EKS cluster. Okay, so it's really easy to find. You just grab it over in the EKS section and register it here. We're also going to need to register that same EKS cluster OIDC endpoint in the dev account, and that's why we have it as the same color as, so anything here has to do with the admin account. So we register the two OIDC providers, and then we move on to the IAM roles that we're going to need. So what's common in the IAM roles is that they both have the same recommended policy. So this is the policy that we recommend for which we have right here. This is the policy that we recommend. This is a simple non-intrusive policy in which we're going to simply describe and list data. We're going to describe a series of services that we're going to show in the Komiser dashboard. So those policies are the same. And what changes here is that we have two trust policies, and in the admin account, we also have an additional policy. Okay, So let's look at this additional policy first. So in this additional policy, we're simply giving this role permission to assume this role. So as we can see here, that this number has to do with this account. So we're allowing this IAM role to assume the policy here. So we will be able to assume, to list and to describe the resources in this account. But this is only one half of the puzzle. So sure, we're allowing this role to assume this role, but we also need to create this trust relationship between this role and this one, and that's what we do right here. So here we're saying through this trust relationship statement that this role is allowed to be assumed. So one thing is to ask to assume, and the other thing is to allow that assumption. So here, as you can see, we have this account, which refers to the admin account, in which we're saying this role is allowed to assume me, in a sense. Okay, so once we have that, that is all we need in the dev account. We just need the role with the recommended policy, and we allow that trust relationship to for this role to assume it. Cool. We're also going to need a trust relationship for this role in which we allow. Let's go over and have a look at it. So this trust relationship is an STS assume role with identity. This is a role in which we are going to say that this particular service account, which is a service account which is in this case, the Komiser namespace, we're allowing this service account to get credentials from this role and to assume that role and to be allowed to do everything that the policy permits this role. One thing that I would really ask you to be careful about is to make sure that the namespace that you're allowing here is the namespace that you're actually going to use. Say, for example, if you deploy your Helm chart to the default namespace because you didn't think about which namespace to deploy to, you're going to have some errors. It's not going to work because we here are whitelisting. We are allowing only the service account, which is called Komiser, that's in the Komiser namespace. Okay, so let's go back. So with that trust relationship in place, with the recommended policy in place, and with the assume dev role in place that we talked about before, in terms of IAM, we're covered. Now we just need to talk about 3 Kubernetes documents, 3 Kubernetes manifests that are needed. So, of course, as we saw here, we are allowing this service account to assume the role. So we're going to add that role to the actual service account. So we grab the role ARN here, and we head over to our service account manifest, and we add that role. Easy enough. Now we are going to do what was kind of easy for us locally, which is to configure our profiles in the credentials file. So in this case, we're going to load our credentials file with a config map, and we can see it here. So this config map, again, all of this is in the walkthrough here. This config map is going to use 2 profiles. A word of warning, please only use the actual name. Don't put anything in front. Don't say profile Oracle account or profile Jake's account. The header is going to look for simply the name of the profile. So just add the name here, and here we're going to in the main admin account, we're going to add the role and the web identity token file. So this is the token that the service account produces. And we are going to get our and we simply configure for the additional account the the role linked to the dev account and the source profile, which is the Oracle account or the admin account here. And we also add a session name. Once that config map is ready, we're going to need to mount it onto our deployment. And we do so in our deployment manifest. And it's very, very important. It's crucial that we mount the config map in the right directory. And the SDK is very particular, and it is looking for the credentials in a certain spot. So make sure that this volume that you create for the config map is mounted on /root/.aws, and then inside the container, you're going to mount it in /root/.aws/credentials. Doing so, you will be able to then run and deploy. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go over to my CLI here, and I have here in my directory I have the Helm chart and all the files cloned. I have this repository cloned locally. So let's just open this again. So here are the files, the manifest that we were looking at, the config map, the deployment, and the service account. With this ready, we are good to go. So let's run a Helm install. I'm going to pass in the values file, and I'm going to give it a name. Say, for example, Komiser multi account. Oh, that's fine. Multi account, and we're going to pass in the files that are here. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's give it a second. Okay, now we can see that it has deployed. I can see that the pod is running, and I'm going to port forward this pod, kubectl port/forward, and we're going to port forward the pod, which is this one, on container port 3000, 3000. This is port forwarding now, so we can head over to the browser and type in localhost 3000. And we can see here, let me just move my head. We can see here that we have the cloud provider, AWS, and we are now seeing the Oracle account, in which if we go through Komiser, we will be able to see the data that's contained inside the Oracle account. Let's go over to Jake's account, which in the example would be the dev account. And we now see that there is a new data retrieval, and we should see two users, if I'm not mistaken, which is the amount of users in this test account. Let's just give it a second so we can retrieve the data. And there we go. And now we can see the data in a different account. Okay, so this is pretty much it. Sorry for taking so long. I just wanted to make sure that all the bases were covered and that we went through the different IAM dependencies and made sure that everything was clear. Please let me know if there's still anything that was not that clear or you need me to go over again. And please let us know if you have any issues deploying this in your own clusters. But all in all, I hope this was informative, and I'd like to thank you for watching. So all the best. Bye-bye.